and now we will be moving to the next topic, which is business of future mobility. And we'll take a look at the technology's impact on transportation with some of the leaders in the industry. And Edmund will co-host this session with Guy Parsonage, who is a partner and leader of the PwC Experience Center, responsible for driving digital innovation with global brands, with a remarkable record in agency leadership, strategic marketing, and iconic experience design. He's an industry pioneer. So ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Mr. Guy Parsonage.
How are you doing, Guy?
I'm good.
Please take a seat.
Thank you for having me. This is a very impressive stage. I love it.
You're welcome. Now, we really have an exciting lineup of speakers talking about the business of future mobility here. Now, design is an integral part of our city, culture, economy, and the living. Now, as we design cities of the future, let's talk about design leadership and mobility challenges. Now, as we all know, designing mobility is really more profound than just designing cars, okay? Now, in these sessions, we'll bring in world-class speakers, business leaders, and designers who know just that. With their visionary leadership and creativity and conviction on human-centered design, they have looked beyond cars as solutions. So, Guy, it's in the pandemic time, you're still rowing?
I'm still rowing, yeah. I had to actually go on the rowing machine this morning because our clubhouse is closing, but I'm still managing to keep moving, yes.
I see. You are bragging me that you're up 5 o'clock in the morning.
I
doing
was.
That. Okay. Now, certainly, this is a big prospect, to future mobility. And what is your take? Do you believe, the future is really moving into mobility in a broader sense?
It's a very exciting time. It really is. As we move from personal mobility and we see how this is now being affected in the way in which governments and cities are being designed and are responding, it's a really exciting time with autonomous, with digital really coming to the forefront now in the mobility space. A lot of very exciting topics to talk about, and I believe we've got some exciting speakers to discuss it with today.
Yeah. So why don't you have the honor to introduce
the
speaker?
We have a wonderful speaker, Chelsia Lau. So Chelsia Lau is of Ford Motors, and she will be calling in from Detroit live shortly. So she is an automotive designer with over 28 years of global design experience and has worked in design studios around the globe, including North America, Europe, and China. So she's currently the Product and Mobility Design Director, responsible for developing innovative products, services, experiences, all through human-centric design. So she's been recognized back in 2006 as the Outstanding Chinese Designer for the DFA World's Outstanding Chinese Designer. And she really is a homegrown designer that we're so proud of. And so maybe we could invite her now. Where is she? There she is.
Hello, Chelsia.
Hey, Chelsia.
Hello.
It's really great to have you here.
It's my pleasure.
I love your backdrop. It's fantastic.
It's all by design.
It's been my home office for the last half a year.
I'm sure.
Right, so Chelsia, why don't you stay on, while I introduce Jim Hackett. Now, let's invite Jim here to the studio. Hello, Jim.
Hi, Jim.
Hello, Edmund. How are you?
I'm fine. Thank you very much, for joining us. We've been trying, to get connected, for quite some time, but it's really great, to have you staging BODW, even though, quite far away from Detroit this time. Now,
Yes, Hong Kong is one of my favorite cities, and I really would want to be with you, but for the challenge of traveling during these virus times. But I'm proud of you for hosting the session. The topic is so important, so thank you for inviting me.
Yeah, the lady actually next to you, Chelsia. Can you tell us about, these magical things, how you two get connected?
Well, if you're referring to me, I like Chelsia's view, but the quick insight for our audience is there was a magazine that came from the Hong Kong Design Center a number of years ago. And when I was running Steelcase, there was a story about me, and also on the same issue, a story about Chelsia, which later, when I became the CEO of Ford, she introduced herself through the magazine to me. And that made an instant connection for me because I have so much respect for what you do, and Victor Lowe, who's been a long served advocate for design in Hong Kong. And so, that's how I met. But Chelsia, you may want to tell from your perspective.
Thank you, Jim. This is a very special moment. I'm honored to be able to be on the stage with you today. It's been a full circle. We've been honored in the year of 2006. Till I first met you was the 10 years later. And we start our journey on the mobility, future mobility. And it's amazing when you put business and design together, that's all the work, amazing future we're here to create.
Well, we have, the time, the session, for you too. Now, for the viewers, who don't know Jim too well, the journey of him, moving from Steelcase, which is a well-known office furniture brand, into overseeing Ford Smart Mobility, and then becoming the president and CEO of Ford Motor Company, strongly substantiates the business value of design. Now, while at Steelcase, he has led the company to acquire a majority stake of Ideal, and literally became a proponent of design thinking, which focuses very much on how humans experience products. Now, I think it's really amazing, Guy, don't you think so? To have a design thinker at the helm of the business.
It's fantastic, absolutely.
Yeah, and also Jim is our DFA Design Leadership Award winner in 2006. So you're right in saying that it comes in the big circle, so to speak. Now, it's great to have you here. Now, Jim, and you're going to share with us, your thoughts of the business of future mobility. So for about 20 minutes, why don't I pass the stage to you?
Thank you very much. And, I didn't want to miss the opportunity tonight, my time tonight, your morning, to talk about the reference that you made quickly, Edmund, which is to be in charge of a business, but have the infusion of design thinking inspiring me as I get to lead two really wonderful companies. Both of them had very long histories. They were each over 100 years old. They were both global. They both had family influence. And in a way, they need design as a way to continue their extraordinary histories. And so I want to, if I could, in the presentation, just situate for you like you are on my business team for a moment before we get to mobility. And I'm trying to explain to others the magic of design in a way to cause them to think about it. It may be the abstraction is high. It's late for me tonight, so I'll try and do a good job of making it understandable. But part of the reason I want to talk the way I'm about to is to get them to slow down to consider the power of design. So if you would all join me in an experience here where imagine that you are with me in an anthropologic site, and you come and you see a spoon being uncovered here. This is a wooden spoon from thousands of years ago. And your brain sees this, and instantly it makes kind of an assumption that's correct, is this was an instrument that people used as an extension of their arm to eat. And so to the business leaders at Steelcase or Ford, I would say to them, this is an example of good design because its persistence can last a very long time. And what assures that is the human connection, because humans last a long time. And if we're in touch with physiological, psychosocial issues, some of these do change. Like as I age, I need different things than I did, 30 years ago when IDEO and Steelcase came together physically. But the persistence of understanding humans is a best way to bet on business investment because it doesn't move as much. Now, I say to them, though, the paradox is that if you bury this and you uncover it and you go, so much didn't change, that gives you reassurance. In today's world, you have to understand that there's a competitor, a spoon maker, for example, who's trying to disrupt now the understanding of the instrument. So in this example, this spoon has sensing capabilities in the ladle such that the person who's eating and maybe has an issue with sugar in their diet can understand the sugar level or a nutrient level of that food. And yet the designer figures that it still is human factored in the way that has to fit in their hand. So we have to make the lithium battery work in that small stem. And therefore, from spoon to spoon, in one way, it's highly persistent and recognizable. But in a second way, and this is an important message to all the young people coming out of school, is it's likely to be disrupted. It's likely to be persistent and then likely to be disrupted. And it's likely to be disrupted by technology. I happen to be a product of a huge technological era where computing changed everything and chips changed everything. But it couldn't have been the first time, right? Because I'm not 150 years old. And if we went back in time, those folks would tell us how technology disrupted their products. Well, I would continue with the business team and I would say, so imagine that the F-150, this by notoriety, is the #1 vehicle in all the world, in all automobile companies. We make more of these than any other vehicle in the world. And so I said, imagine it's buried and thousands of years from now, it's uncovered by anthropologists. What's persistent about it? What did we get right that because humans were using it, still made sense thousands of years in the future? But what did we get wrong today that to them looks silly for us to have it today? I'll give you an example. I don't have a picture of this, but I think you can follow it. In all these vehicles, we have a thing called a glove box. Now, this is on the passenger side in Western vehicles, on the right side of the vehicle. And in it, there are no gloves. It's called the glove box because in history, humans had to put gloves on to steer the vehicle because there was no power steering and it was too hard to do it with your hands. Or there were no alternators and they had to put the gloves on to go out and crank and start the car. And when they came back, they put the gloves, took them off their hands, put them in the glove box. So they're still there. But what's in them today is the registration of the owner's proof that they own the vehicle. Now, in a way, design has this accountability that, okay, it's all right if it sits there because it had a purpose years ago, but guess what happened in time? That it upset social justice. If you were black and in America and you were pulled over for something, and you reached to the glove box to get your owner's registration, an officer is worried that there's a weapon in there. So it changes the whole context of the interface of the driver and the policeman. And we've been talking about this in America because of social justice issues. So it starts with there's no gloves in there anymore, and there's no reason why the registration should be that for the driver. And this is what design's magic is all about, as I described to the business folks. How does it persist? And then why you have to take the potential to disrupt it. So because of technology and Bitcoin and things like that, we can put the registration in the glass of the vehicle and the officer can just shine a flashlight on it and see proof that it's you. When he turns the light off, it goes away and we don't have the kind of social issues that I just talked about. This was what I was raised on, which is the notion of understanding use. And this is a controversial issue that I hope comes out in the conference because there's a language that's emerging as I'm the older guy now practicing this as a CEO, where people are saying, look, user-centered got over-dramatized. It's not as important as Jim Hackett as you think it is. But I disagree with that because I think the nature of understanding use is one of the most persistent levers that business people can bet on, given a world where there's a lot of accountability for mistakes. And yet, at the same time, you have to know that your bias for understanding is generally going to make you assume the reason for that is one way, and in fact, it's used another. A glove box has no purpose for holding gloves. It's a place for registration. And so we have to, as business leaders, understand the nature of learning, that we're constantly learning about use in a way that we ask ourselves a really important question about the why of things. Because I remember, Victor, a famous graphic that Patrick Whitney drew from a discussion that he had with the head of Motorola, Bob Galvin, who was competing in China with beepers. And they had 50% market share, Motorola did, and they lost it very quickly because a Chinese competitor figured out that the Chinese held the beepers in their hands versus putting them on their belt. And so they made the shape more of an hourglass to fit in your hand, and therefore they won more share. While Motorola people missed this. And so they came up with this famous saying that the opportunity to make things really powerful, low cost, last a long time, lightweight, and then understanding use can be in conflict. And that's what the design gap is. That's why you're all coming to sessions like this, so you can learn about thinking of use as you make it versus the other way around. And believe it or not, a company as successful as Ford or successful as Steelcase, they tend to get not lazy, because that would be an indictment. These are not lazy people, but the process gets lazy. They look at competition and they say, oh, there's our target. There's a well-known company that I am very respectful of, that we compete with in the automobile industry, that today is describing a strategy of competing with Tesla. And so the way they're thinking about it is not use, they're thinking about what Tesla has figured out. And that's a dead end in design, because their competition is not your broadcast for what you need to do. You have to learn to master this ability to learn and study. And so that's what we did as we now move into the mobility discussion in my last 10 minutes. We began to think about using design techniques. What is it about the nature of transportation and all these variables that's getting upset by time and technology? And at a very core level, the safety of a vehicle matters, tremendously. Therefore, the weight of the vehicle represents the structures that you're using to make it safe. And therefore, the cost of the vehicle represents the weight that you're using to make it safe. And I can keep going on and on, where you say the daisy chain of reason for the way a vehicle's made today is all being upended because of technology. And I want to describe for you more about what we're doing in that realm. And so this little video, if you don't mind, it'll play a little background music, but I'll talk over it. So you got to note that in America, 37,000 people die every year in accidents. So safety matters. So Chelsia had a big role in this. We started to think about a town here in Michigan, where I went to college, University of Michigan. And we went to them and said, we want to build a model called the City Insight Studio of your streets. And we brought to life with car data where the intersections had heightened braking actions by a vehicle. And so we could get that information real time. And because of that, we were able then to correlate the data of braking and accidents. And we can see the rate at which that's happening, and we now know which are the most dangerous intersections in Ann Arbor, Michigan. We can actually plot all this information just from one variable. These vehicles have chimneys of data that are coming from like you can't believe today, unlike anything that computing ever saw. We'll have 100 million years worth of vehicle data in 2 years, 100 million years worth of data. So we can now have the arteries of cities come to life in a way that we can now understand lots of topics, including parking. For example, in Ann Arbor, this same city, they wanted to keep building parking garages, and we were telling them, you have all kinds of capacity, you just don't know it. People approach a parking garage and can't tell if they keep driving around whether there's an open space. So this birthed a notion that I talked about in the CES show in Las Vegas. I gave the keynote speech and I introduced a notion called a transportation operating system. And a moment ago, you were just talking about this on stage where you talked about smart cities. And it was our belief, my position, that a city really needs to narrow the focus of the intelligent question towards transportation first. And once you get that mastered, you can start thinking about expanding it. Because for your constituents, transportation is by far one of the biggest challenges that they have in what they have to deal with. And so we started to portray, if you get this operating system right, you can actually change the design of the city, because all the attributes that were there were when the vehicles weren't intelligent. And you built compensating processes for the lack of intelligence. Red, green, yellow lights for access, lines for where they drive, and so forth. This has changed in the future. Once the vehicle gets so intelligent, we can do things like change the throughput of highways so that we get more traffic through a less volume of lanes setting. We actually did simulations in this drawing so that we could return bike lanes and walking and bring the cityscape closer in a human way, and we have more throughput. And the reason for that is this underlying transportation system where the intelligence of the vehicle is talking to the edge, the Internet of Things, so to speak, and it's mediating issues for parking, for egress, for access. In the Q&A, we can talk more about some of the powerful ideas that have come from that. Because this is a design audience, I just want to tell you something exciting. Bill Ford, who's a Ford and a descendant of this founder, is one of my best friends and such an inspiration. He acquired, the company acquired the train station in downtown Detroit that had been left to really fall apart. And we're totally restoring this, and we're making this the center of this transportation science. The University of Michigan's building an adjacent facility. There's new graduate degrees coming, and we've brought together a collection of companies that are in the tech world, because there's so much that has to be done together to build this transportation operating system. And Ford won't own it by itself, but because of our leadership in it, we get a chance to imagine the value in transforming the system, where the vehicle's future might sit in a world like this. Now, I want to just transition in terms of the confidence that you bestowed on me in 2006 and tell you, when I came to Ford, I was sitting on the board and I was asked to go into the CEO job. And I really wasn't sure that they were ready for me. Because I said, you got to understand that we've lost track of the empathy of use. You heard me give you a couple of examples, and I can't imagine making one more vehicle the old way. So they said, well, what do you mean? And so we created, through our partnership with IDEO that I had developed over 30 years, we faked a translational capability called D.Ford. These are labs. We've built 6 of them around the world, and they do things that I'll show you here in this video that to designers will look de rigueur, but in the world of Ford, this was breakthrough kind of things. The notion to leave conference rooms and build places where we have information persistence and we have simulation of the nature of the system. We built mock-ups and prototypes that were cheap and inexpensive. These steel structures had never been used. We built things out of foam core. They only used clay, which we still do. And we took what I've learned over 30 years of trying to perfect and watch teams unpack complex problems, and we've now integrated this at Ford. And it's a global effort. In fact, today I'm still hold office hours as a coach, and I had a Melbourne team working with me on the Ford Ranger. This is our smaller pickup in Asia, and how we can get in touch with the nature of the way our Asian population wants to use pickups versus Americans, something so basic could not be addressed unless we had the power of design and technique that you hear me talking about here. Let me give you a couple of examples outside the mobility thing, Edmund, just quickly so that I build confidence for the young people. This is the new F-150 pickup truck. Again, this is the #1 volume vehicle in the world. Well, through the techniques that we're talking about, we found in observing that they were using the truck as a tool support on job sites. So we integrated the measurement system into that tailgate. They don't need to grab a ruler or a tape measure. They can just use what we've inscribed in the material that backs that tailgate. There's jigs and fixtures that they can pull out of that to hold lumber. But probably most exciting to the world is this using hybrid technology so that there's a generator built in the side of the truck. It's the same hybrid that's powering the engine and bringing incredible efficiency to a pickup truck, but it's also got this practical application for jobs that are being done inside the pickup. And I can't help but emphasize that my time at Steelcase did transcend my time at Ford, Victor, because I couldn't forget about work. And so we found that people in pickup trucks do work inside their cabs. And so we took the console area, which this transforms out into a working desk like this. When they're done desking, it folds back, and it's the kind of thing that your elbow sits on while you're driving. Can you believe this? This was a #1 rated feature in the tests we did with customers, to be able to just open their laptop and work. And again, to tie this to the beginning, the persistence of understanding about what that center console was. Never imagined somebody bringing an iPad or a laptop in and working, not while they're driving, hopefully, but that will come with robotic vehicles in the future. This new Bronco is quite a success story. This is a return to a brand. If you're not familiar with the American culture, this is a really hot product. It was so hot that I asked them, though, not to mimic the old, but to use design thinking to bring virtue that no one had ever imagined in a Bronco. We don't have time tonight to go through all these, but people tend to take the cladding off when they go outdoors so they can have open air. All of the competitors didn't have anywhere to put that material. The doors were chained to trees so they weren't stolen while they went up in the hills. We found a way to store all the objects in the vehicle. And in doing that, we were able, in the center diagram, to have the mirror stay on the outside frame so you can take all the doors off and not lose your side mirror. There's a bolt there that's really special that has a Bronco signature on it, that the user knows wherever they see that Bronco signature, they can hang something that they care about in the performance of the vehicle. So I'll just end with, I'm an extraordinary curious guy, almost 66 years old, and I'm a learn-it-all. I'm not a know-it-all. And David Kelly taught me about this notion of creative confidence. And I just want to thank everybody in this conference for your commitment to that, and say that we will have a better world because of people like you working in the ways that I'm talking about. Thank you, Edmund.
Thank you very much, Jim, for your sharing. Now let's bring Chelsia back, to the studio.
That was truly inspirational, and I was waiting for the cars, and the cars came at the end. It was great to see them. I'm a big car lover, but also to be able to see how you are influencing the whole system of mobility overall. The one thing that you didn't spend a lot of time talking about, which is a very hot topic in this region, is around new energy vehicles and the move from internal combustion to new energy vehicles. It's obviously got an impact into the systems of how we design our cities, an impact into how we're actually providing that energy. But I really want to understand from yourselves, from both of you actually, how does that affect what's your thoughts around the general topic, and then also how does that affect the design approach that you take to the vehicles once that new energy systems are included?
Yeah, let me set the table, though, in a way, because we started the game of this discussion like you were on the management team. And one of the first things that I irritated them with is that electrification is a form of propulsion. at a higher level. Design is about abstracting problems to the higher level. There could be hydrogen. There could be there's a number. There can be solar, and so I wanted us, from a Ford perspective, to believe that we will always seek the best propulsion solution. So clearly, the dominant emergent idea is battery, lithium batteries. Just for the uninformed, the cost curve has dropped now. It's actually moving faster than Moore's law. And so a battery used to be 70% of the cost of the vehicle. It's going to be under 30 on its way to the 20%. So that's going to allow the enablement, and part of the reason is the region in China creating the scale, which is driving the cost down. But one thing that I just want to reinforce because of design, the business of design, one of the big mistakes that was made early is we put the engine where the horse was in the earliest iterations of automobiles. It was in the center, or excuse me, the front. And we know from car design that the center of gravity is better if the engine isn't in the center, but you don't have any room for people. So, it worked. Well, we get to address that now with electrification because it's underneath, which changes the weight ratio and gives us this internal cavity that's extraordinary. So we have a product that's called a Navigator. It's our largest sport utility. And we have another product called an Aviator or Explorer. And we can have, with the EV version of the Explorer, more space than you have in the bigger Navigator. And that's the big breakthrough for humans, is what can we do with all that space inside to change the notion of the way you will enjoy your vehicle. And then we couple with that it has autonomous capabilities, that it can drive itself, as I talked about earlier. Well, then that means you can be doing different things in that bigger space. And so the whole exercise has been trying to interpret that for advantage. The earliest work on electrification was just take where the gasoline engine was, take that away and just make that a trunk. In fact, it's called a frunk, a front trunk. Its nickname is a frunk. And I thought that's not imaginative enough. There's so much more we can do with that space. So Chelsea, just to brag about her, she had a design team in China, and I would come to her, and you should talk about the team that you put together to imagine these future ideas, how you did that.
Great, thanks, Jim. So a couple of things, like speaking of the new energy vehicle, it's very exciting. Ford just expanding the Mustang family, and then really is in the first time in this 55 years, we're adding the all electric Mustang Mach-E SUV to the lineup. What's interesting about that, I thought, is that the notion electric vehicle are only good for reducing gas consumption. It also is a zero emission. In this case, actually, for the new design, not only the people can enjoy the exhilarating to drive, but it looks gorgeous and it's really can be easy, adapt to the current and future customer lifestyle. And as Jim touched on earlier, with this new possibility, it lends itself to other form factors, and then they can be more tailored for different usage. And example of that, freeing up the trunk space. In the case of the Mach-E, it turns into a surprise and delight. It can carry a big, large luggage. At the same time, it had the drainage. So imagine if you have a tailgate event, and then you can have the people enjoying, the cool drinks, and then getting together and hang out around the area. It's about bringing people together. And so EV actually is not only the fundamental to the revolution of the autonomous vehicle in the future, it has so much more possibility and open up to a whole new experience for the user, for the rider, and any future cases. So both, I think the EV, AV can function as the network node, connecting the Internet of Things within a city platform.
But Edmund, just because this is an education institution that you run, I want to just use a teachable moment here to explain that when you charge a vehicle, I have witnessed that people take the charger out of the vehicle and the little door that it is open to access. It's the same kind of little door that you put petrol or gas in. People forget to close it because it's such a new application, and they drive through their garage and they rip this off. And so I've been saying to the designers at Ford that we actually are not trying to take the dominant design of how we fueled a car with gasoline and make it seem like the way you recharge it with electricity. We have a way to advance this now, like I just showed you with the spoon. And so the breakthroughs in charging inductively and things like that are really the promise of EVs. And so the people in this audience are the ones who are going to imagine that.
That's fantastic. Absolutely. I'd like to see that being able to drive in and charge the car instantly just by putting it underneath the car. No plugging in at all. Fantastic. I want to touch on a little bit what you spoke about in Michigan and your role in future transportation systems, because we're talking about the business of mobility and the future of mobility, and it looks like you're coming up with a new model, not just for how you fit into the design of new cities, but also the business role and what that might do to the future business itself. It looks like you've got new collaborations, you're potentially being involved in entirely new projects that you weren't involved in before. So maybe you could expand upon the business impact around your role in those kind of city mobility projects.
Briefly, please.
Well, at the base level, it's we can use the past as a proxy. When computing first is engineered and computer science makes it possible. My friend Bill Moggridge makes the first grid computer for the space shuttle, but the human interface wasn't adequate. And so the collection of expertise that will begin to shape the model of these new technologies coming together is just now happening. It's so exciting. Maybe, and I know PwC gets this, it's probably an $11 trillion opportunity. But let me give you a practical example. If you just think of the logistics systems, and here we are in the holiday season and watching in America, they're telling us that if we don't have our holiday packages moving by December 11th, they won't arrive by December 25th because the system's so overwhelmed. Well, the logistics of movement of goods is changed because of the internet accessibility, but the city system never adapted. So the transportation operating system could relieve all this pressure on the nature of inventory and goods movement. And I actually think Ford does, and I agree with this. Jim Farley, my successor, is really the father of this idea that the commercial vehicle segment will be the first one that's roboticized, which will then cause the nature of the follow-on systems to change. Warehouses having lots of inventory of things that are waiting for to move will now be upset by the fact that the vehicle never really has to stop moving. So Mr. Bezos is a good friend and he's invested in a lot of warehouses, but he's going to find that he may not need all that space in the future. And it's hard to imagine, what do you mean? How does it come from the factory and never stop moving? It's because of autonomous technology that keeps everything moving.
Fantastic. Well, thank you very much for that. I think we're now having to wrap up. I'm going to hand back to Edmund.
Right. Well, Jim and Chelsia, thank you so much, for sharing with us, your insights about the future mobility. Now, there are actually rolling number of questions actually coming in, but we won't have time, to go through that. Perhaps, we can select a few of them, and hopefully, we can turn them into some of the interviews, so that, we can carry on some of the dissemination of your insights after BODW. But thank you very much, for joining us, today. Now, I hope that, the session actually provides you some food for thought on the future design opportunities and challenges facing future mobility. So thank you very much, for your viewing and participation. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Edmund, and our speakers for such an inspiring discussion. Thank you. So this live broadcast on View TV6 has now come to an end. So if you would like to be inspired by creative vision for more than 100 designers and business leaders, you can get your free experience pass at BODW.com. And don't forget to tune in this evening at 8 p.m. with us on View TV6. We will broadcast design and culture and creativity for future cities. Thank you for joining us at BODW.